She took the pregnancy test, and those 2 pink lines changed everything. For 6 months, Amara had been secretly sleeping with both her boyfriend Jae-hyun and his 50-year-old father, Min-soo. The son was sweet, passionate, talking about marriage and forever. The father? Experienced, dominant, dangerous, leaving marks she couldn't hide and cravings she couldn't stop. It all started with one forbidden touch under the dinner table, while Jae-hyun sat right there talking about their future. Now she was pregnant, and she had no idea which one was the father. 1 positive test, 2 men, 1 family about to be torn apart forever. Welcome to K-fairytales stories, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. 6 months earlier, Amara stepped into the Park family estate for the first time, her hand tucked into Jae-hyun's as he led her through marble hallways that whispered of old money and older secrets. She wore a simple black dress that hugged her curves in all the right places, her natural hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail that showed off the elegant line of her neck. Jae-hyun had been insistent about this dinner, practically begging her to meet his father, promising it would be casual, easy, nothing to worry about. But the moment the dining room doors opened, and she saw Park Min-soo sitting at the head of that impossibly long table, casual and easy became the last words she'd use to describe anything about that night. Min-soo was nothing like she expected. At 50, he carried his age like a weapon, every gray hair at his temples deliberate, every line on his face earned through battles she couldn't imagine. He wore a black suit with the jacket discarded, his white shirt rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms that spoke of a man who still worked with his hands despite his wealth. When he looked up from his wine glass and his eyes met hers, something electric shot through her body, something wrong and dangerous and absolutely undeniable. His gaze traveled over her once, clinical and assessing, before settling on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Jae-hyun made the introductions with the nervous energy of a son seeking approval. This is Amara, the girl I told you about, studying art at Seoul National. Incredible talent. Absolutely brilliant. Min-soo stood, his movements fluid and controlled, and extended his hand. The moment their palms touched, Amara felt heat spread from her fingertips straight to her core. His grip was firm, possessive, holding on just a second longer than necessary. "A pleasure," he said, his voice low and textured like expensive whiskey. "My son has excellent taste, though he failed to mention how beautiful you are." The words should have been a compliment, paternal and appropriate, but the way his thumb brushed against her wrist before releasing her hand felt like a promise of something forbidden. Dinner started innocently enough. They talked about art, about her studies, about Jae-hyun's work at his father's company. Min-soo asked thoughtful questions, listened with genuine interest, made her feel seen in a way that was intoxicating. Jae-hyun held her hand on top of the table, occasionally squeezing it when he got excited about something, completely oblivious to the way his father's gaze kept returning to her, dark and considering. The wine flowed freely, loosening tongues and lowering guards. Somewhere between the second and third course, Amara felt a foot brush against her ankle under the table. She assumed it was Jae-hyun being playful, but when she glanced at him, he was engaged in conversation with a business associate who'd joined them, gesturing wildly about some merger. The foot moved higher, sliding along her calf with deliberate intent. Amara's eyes shot to Min-soo, who was cutting his steak with perfect precision, his expression giving nothing away. But when his gaze flicked to hers for just a second, she saw the challenge there, the dark amusement, the absolute certainty that she wouldn't say anything. Her heart hammered against her ribs as his foot continued its path, reaching her knee, pausing there with pressure that made her shift in her seat. She should have pulled away, should have excused herself, should have done literally anything except sit there feeling heat pool between her thighs, while her boyfriend talked about quarterly earnings not 3 feet away. Min-soo withdrew his foot as casually as he'd initiated contact, returning his attention to his meal like nothing had happened. But Amara could barely taste the food on her plate, could barely follow the conversation swirling around her. Every time Min-soo spoke, his voice seemed to vibrate through her bones. Every time he reached for his wine glass, she found herself watching his hands, imagining them on her skin. By the time dessert arrived, she was wound so tight she thought she might shatter. Jae-hyun excused himself to take a phone call, leaving her alone at the table with his father and the weight of everything unsaid between them. "You seem uncomfortable," Min-soo observed, his voice pitched low enough that the staff clearing plates couldn't hear. Is the company not to your liking? Amara forced herself to meet his eyes, refusing to be intimidated despite the way her pulse raced. The company is fine, she said carefully. It's the behavior I find questionable. His smile was slow, predatory, absolutely devastating. Good, he said, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of a man who'd never been denied anything. I was worried you might be too naive to understand what was happening, but you're smarter than that, aren't you, Amara? You know exactly what I want. The words hung between them like a live wire, sparking with dangerous possibility. Before Amara could respond, could tell him to go to hell, or demand an apology, or do any of the rational things she should have done, Jae-hyun returned, sliding back into his seat with a kiss to her temple that felt suddenly childish compared to the dark promise in his father's gaze. Sorry about that, work never sleeps, he said cheerfully, completely unaware of the tension crackling in the air. Dad, thanks for dinner. I think we should get going, early morning tomorrow. Min-soo nodded graciously, the perfect host, the devoted father. Of course, but Amara is welcome back anytime. In fact, I insist on it. I'd love to see some of her artwork. Perhaps we could arrange a private viewing. The next morning, Amara woke in Jae-hyun's apartment with guilt sitting heavy on her chest. They'd made love the night before, sweet and tender, him whispering about their future together, about moving in together, about forever. She'd responded with the right sounds, the right touches, but the whole time her mind had been elsewhere, replaying the feel of Min-soo's foot against her leg, the dark heat in his eyes, the way his voice had wrapped around her name like ownership. She was going insane, she decided, letting one inappropriate touch derail her entire relationship. Jae-hyun was everything she should want. Young, successful, devoted, talking about marriage, while his father was probably just being provocative, testing her, seeing if she was worthy of his son. A week passed with no contact from Min-soo, and Amara started to convince herself she'd imagined the whole thing, blown it out of proportion. Then Jae-hyun mentioned his father wanted to see her artwork, had specifically requested a private viewing at his office. It's a huge compliment, Jae-hyun said excitedly. Dad never takes interest in my girlfriend's work. He must really like you. The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they felt like a warning. But Amara agreed, because refusing would raise questions she didn't want to answer. And maybe there was a part of her that wanted to see him again. Wanted to prove she could resist whatever dark pull he seemed to exert. Min-soo's office occupied the top floor of Park Industries, all floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive minimalism. His assistant led Amara in with professional courtesy, then disappeared, leaving her alone in all that space with Min-soo rising from behind his desk like a king from his throne. He'd requested she bring her portfolio, which she clutched like a shield, but when he gestured for her to sit on the leather sofa rather than across from his desk, she knew this viewing had nothing to do with art. Show me what you've created, he said, settling beside her close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made her head swim. She opened her portfolio with trembling hands, pointing out pieces she'd spent hours on, explaining her techniques and inspirations. Min-soo listened with what seemed like genuine interest, asking intelligent questions, offering thoughtful observations. For almost 30 minutes, Amara relaxed, thinking maybe she'd been wrong about his intentions. Maybe this really was just about her art. Then he reached across her to point at a particular piece, his arm brushing against her breasts in a way that couldn't be accidental. She froze. And he didn't move away, didn't apologize, just held that position, his forearm pressing against her, his breath warm on her neck. You have incredible talent, he murmured. But talent without passion is just technical skill. Tell me, Amara, what makes you passionate? She should have stood up, should have left, should have reported him for harassment. Instead, she heard herself whisper, I don't know what you want from me. His laugh was low, intimate, absolutely certain. Yes, you do, he said, turning his head so his lips were inches from her ear. You've known since the moment you walked into my home. You felt it the same way I did. This pull, this inevitability. I'm with your son, she protested weakly, even as her body betrayed her, leaning infinitesimally toward him. My son, Min-soo said, finally pulling back to look at her directly, is a boy playing at being a man, He has no idea what to do with a woman like you. But I do. I know exactly how to handle you." The confidence in his voice, the absolute certainty, it should have repulsed her. Instead, it ignited something deep in her core, something hungry and desperate that had been starving in her relationship with Jae-hyun. "You're wrong," she managed, standing abruptly, gathering her portfolio with shaking hands. "I love Jae-hyun. Whatever you think this is, you're wrong." Min-soo didn't try to stop her, didn't argue, just watched her with those dark, knowing eyes. "Run if you need to," he said calmly. "But we both know you'll come back, because I'm offering you something you can't get from my son. Something you didn't even know you needed until you felt it. And when you're ready to stop lying to yourself, my door is always open." Amara fled, taking the elevator down in a daze, her entire body vibrating with unwanted desire. She went straight to Jae-hyun's apartment, needing normalcy, needing to remind herself why she was with him, why she loved him. They had dinner, watched a movie, made love on his couch, and the whole time she felt like she was going through motions, playing a part. Jae-hyun was gentle, considerate, asking if she felt good, if she wanted him to slow down, treating her like she might break. It was sweet, it was safe, it was absolutely nothing like what she suspected Min-soo would be like. And that thought, that comparison, it made her hate herself even as her body responded to her boyfriend with mechanical pleasure. 2 weeks passed in careful avoidance. Amara made excuses whenever Jae-hyun suggested family dinners, claimed work or school obligations, anything to avoid being near Min-soo. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Jae-hyun's birthday arrived, and refusing to attend his party at the family estate would have been unthinkable. So she dressed in emerald green silk that Jae-hyun loved, styled her hair in loose curls, painted her lips red, and walked into that house like a soldier heading to battle. The party was elegant, tasteful, filled with Jae-hyun's friends and business associates. For the first hour, Amara managed to avoid Min-soo entirely, staying glued to her boyfriend's side, laughing at his friends' jokes, playing the perfect girlfriend. Then Jae-hyun's mother appeared, warm and lovely, insisting on showing Amara the gardens. They walked through manicured paths, discussing flowers and wedding plans, because apparently Jae-hyun had been talking to his mother about proposing. The information should have filled Amara with joy. Instead, it felt like a noose tightening. When they returned to the party, Jae-hyun was nowhere to be found, his mother explaining he'd been pulled into an urgent business call. "Would you mind terribly keeping Min-soo company?" his mother asked. "He hates these parties, but does them for Jae-hyun's sake. He could use someone interesting to talk to." Before Amara could refuse, she was being steered toward the library where Min-soo had apparently retreated. He stood by the window, bourbon in hand, staring out at the night. And when she entered, he didn't turn around. "Close the door," he said quietly, and against all reason, all common sense, she did. The click of the lock felt final, damning. Now he turned, and the look on his face, it was hunger barely contained, possession barely leashed. 2 weeks, he said. 2 weeks of you avoiding me, pretending this isn't happening, lying to yourself and my son." His voice was rough, strained, nothing like his usual controlled tone. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" This became their pattern over the following weeks. Amara would see Jae-hyun in the evenings, playing the loving girlfriend, discussing their future, making plans that felt more like lies with each passing day. Then she'd see Min-soo whenever he demanded, which was often, his appetite for her apparently insatiable. He'd text her at random times, simple commands, "My office now," or "The estate pool house, 8 p.m., and she'd go, every single time, hating herself and craving him in equal measure. The guilt ate at her constantly, but not enough to stop, never enough to stop. Jae-hyun noticed she seemed distracted, but attributed it to stress from school. He became even more attentive, more loving, talking seriously about proposing, about wanting to start their life together properly. Each kind word from him was a knife in Amara's heart, but still she couldn't stop. Min-soo had awakened something in her, something dark and demanding that couldn't be satisfied by sweet dates and gentle lovemaking. She needed the intensity, the possession, the way Min-soo looked at her like she was his and his alone, consequences be damned. 1 month in, Min-soo took her to a hotel, a penthouse suite with views of the entire city. "This is ours," he told her. A place where we don't have to hide. Where I can have you the way I want. He'd been insistent they use protection, both of them too smart to add pregnancy to this disaster. But that night, wrapped in luxury sheets, he paused before entering her. I want to feel you, he said roughly. All of you, no barriers. It's not safe, Amara protested weakly, even as her body arched toward him. I don't care, he said. I want to know what it's like to have you completely. And then he was pushing into her bare, and the sensation was so intense, so perfect, that all her objections died. They were careless after that, caught up in the addiction of each other. Sometimes they used protection, sometimes they didn't. Both of them operating under the dangerous assumption that luck would hold. 2 months became 3, 3 became 4, and Amara found herself living this impossible double life. Days with Jae-hyun, sweet and innocent and full of future plans. Nights with Min-soo, dark and desperate and absolutely consuming. She knew it couldn't last, knew eventually something would break. But she couldn't stop, couldn't walk away, couldn't choose. 5 months in, Jae-hyun proposed. He did it at a restaurant, on one knee, with a ring that sparkled under dim lights, surrounded by other diners who applauded when Amara said yes. Because what else could she say with everyone watching, with Jae-hyun looking so hopeful, so certain of their future together? She wore his ring and felt like a fraud, felt like the worst person alive. That night she showed up at Min-soo's hotel with tears streaming down her face. He took one look at the engagement ring, and his expression went cold, dangerous. Take it off, he demanded. I can't, she sobbed. He proposed in public. Everyone saw. I can't just... Min-soo grabbed her hand, tried to remove the ring himself, but she pulled away. You're going to marry him, Min-soo said, his voice flat, empty of the warmth she'd grown addicted to. You're going to marry my son while you're sleeping with me. What did you think would happen, Amara? That I'd break up his engagement, claim you publicly, destroy my family for this, for us? His words cut because they were true, because she hadn't thought that far ahead, had been living in the moment, in the sensation, in the lie. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know what I thought. Min-soo's expression softened slightly, his hand cupping her face with unexpected gentleness. You thought you could have both of us, he said quietly. And maybe you can. Maybe this doesn't have to end. The suggestion hung between them, terrible and tempting. You mean keep doing this, even after I marry him? Amara asked, hating how much she wanted that solution. Min-soo pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. I mean, I'm not ready to give you up. And I don't think you're ready to give me up either. So yes, we keep this going. We're careful. We're smart. And we have what we have for as long as we can have it. It's monstrous, Amara said, even as she was already leaning into him, already surrendering. We're monstrous, Min-soo agreed. And then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, both of them falling deeper into this beautiful, terrible thing they'd created. Amara backed against the door, her heart racing, her body already responding to his proximity. I haven't done anything, she said, but the words came out breathless, unconvincing. Min-soo crossed the space between them in 3 strides, planting his hands on either side of her head, caging her in without touching her. You've invaded every thought, he growled. Ruined me for anyone else. Made me obsess over something I can't have, shouldn't want. His forehead dropped to rest against the door beside her head, and she could feel him trembling with restraint. Tell me to stop, he whispered. Tell me you don't feel this and I'll walk away. I'll never touch you, never speak of this again. She should have said it, should have pushed him away, should have screamed for help. Instead, she reached up and pulled his face to hers, kissing him with all the desperate hunger she'd been suppressing for weeks. Min-soo made a sound like a man dying, his control shattering as he kissed her back with bruising intensity. His hands were everywhere, in her hair, on her waist, sliding up her thighs beneath her dress. He lifted her against the door, her legs wrapping around him automatically, and the feel of him, hard and wanting against her core, it erased every rational thought. This is wrong, she gasped between kisses. So wrong. I know, he groaned, biting down her neck, leaving marks she'd have to hide. I don't care. I can't care. Not anymore. They barely made it to the leather sofa before he was pushing her dress up, tearing at the delicate fabric of her underwear, his hands rough and desperate in a way that made her feel absolutely alive. Everything that happened next was a blur of sensation and guilt and pleasure so intense she thought she might die from it. Min-soo wasn't gentle, wasn't sweet, wasn't anything like his son. He was commanding, dominant, taking what he wanted while simultaneously giving her everything she hadn't known she needed. When it was over, they lay tangled together, both breathing hard, both knowing they'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "What have we done?" Amara whispered, reality crashing back in waves of horror. Min-soo's arm tightened around her waist, possessive even in aftermath. "Something inevitable," he said. "Something that was always going to happen from the moment you walked into my home." "This can't happen again," she said, trying to pull away, but he held her firm. "It will," he said with absolute certainty. "Because now that I've had you, now that I know what it's like, I'm not letting you go." "You'll have to," Amara insisted. "I love Jaehyun. I'm with Jaehyun." Min-soo's laugh was bitter, dark. "You think you love my son, but what you feel for him is comfortable, safe. Nothing like this." He rolled over her, his body pinning hers. Before Amara could argue, could push him away, could do anything, there was a knock on the library door. Jaehyun's voice came through, cheerful and unsuspecting. "Dad, you in there? Mom said you might be. I need your signature on something." They froze, two people caught in the most unforgivable betrayal. Min-soo's eyes locked on Amara's, and she saw something fierce and unrepentant there. "1 second," he called out, his voice perfectly controlled despite their compromising position. He stood, straightening his clothes with practiced efficiency, then handed Amara her torn underwear with a look that said, "This is far from over." "Fix yourself," he murmured, "and when you leave, use the garden door." Amara watched him walk to the door, unlock it, greet his son with paternal warmth, discuss whatever document needed signing, all while she crouched behind the sofa, half-dressed and drowning in shame. When Jaehyun finally left, when the door closed again, Min-soo turned back to her with that possessive gaze. "Tomorrow," he said, "my office, 3 p.m., don't make me come find you." Then he left, leaving her alone with the wreckage of her morality and the ache between her thighs that told her she'd be there tomorrow and every day after. Because he was right about one thing. This fire, it had already consumed everything. The next afternoon, Amara stood outside Park Industries, telling herself to turn around, to go home, to end this before it destroyed everything. Instead, she walked through those glass doors, took the elevator to the top floor, and knocked on Min-soo's office with a hand that only trembled slightly. He opened it himself, no assistant in sight, and the moment she stepped inside, he was on her, kissing her against the closed door with a hunger that stole her breath. "No more talking," he growled. "No more pretending. You're mine now, accept it." And she did. God help her. She did. Surrendering to him completely, letting him take her on his desk, against the windows, everywhere in that office, claiming her in ways that left no doubt about who she belonged to.
This became their pattern over the following weeks. Amara would see Jae-hyun in the evenings, playing the loving girlfriend, discussing their future, making plans that felt more like lies with each passing day. Then she'd see Min-soo whenever he demanded, which was often, his appetite for her apparently insatiable. He'd text her at random times, simple commands, "My office now," or "the estate pool house, 8 p.m., and she'd go, every single time, hating herself and craving him in equal measure. The guilt ate at her constantly, but not enough to stop, never enough to stop. Jae-hyun noticed she seemed distracted, but attributed it to stress from school. He became even more attentive, more loving, talking seriously about proposing, about wanting to start their life together properly. Each kind word from him was a knife in Amara's heart, but still, she couldn't stop. Min-soo had awakened something in her, something dark and demanding that couldn't be satisfied by sweet dates and gentle lovemaking. She needed the intensity, the possession, the way Min-soo looked at her like she was his and his alone, consequences be damned. 1 month in, Min-soo took her to a hotel, a penthouse suite with views of the entire city. "This is ours," he told her, "a place where we don't have to hide, where I can have you the way I want." He'd been insistent they use protection, both of them too smart to add pregnancy to this disaster. But that night, wrapped in luxury sheets, he paused before entering her. "I want to feel you," he said roughly. "All of you, no barriers." "It's not safe," Amara protested weakly, even as her body arched toward him. "I don't care," he said. "I want to know what it's like to have you completely." And then he was pushing into her bare, and the sensation was so intense, so perfect, that all her objections died. They were careless after that, caught up in the addiction of each other. Sometimes they used protection, sometimes they didn't, both of them operating under the dangerous assumption that luck would hold. 2 months became 3, 3 became 4, and Amara found herself living this impossible double life. Days with Jae-hyun, sweet and innocent and full of future plans. Nights with Min-soo, dark and desperate and absolutely consuming. She knew it couldn't last. Knew eventually something would break, but she couldn't stop, couldn't walk away, couldn't choose. 5 months in, Jae-hyun proposed. He did it at a restaurant, on one knee, with a ring that sparkled under dim lights, surrounded by other diners who applauded when Amara said yes. Because what else could she say? With everyone watching, with Jae-hyun looking so hopeful, so certain of their future together. She wore his ring and felt like a fraud, felt like the worst person alive. That night, she showed up at Min-soo's hotel with tears streaming down her face. He took one look at the engagement ring, and his expression went cold, dangerous. "Take it off," he demanded. "I can't," she sobbed. He proposed in public. Everyone saw. "I can't just—" Min-soo grabbed her hand, tried to remove the ring himself, but she pulled away. "You're going to marry him," Min-soo said, his voice flat, empty of the warmth she'd grown addicted to. "You're going to marry my son while you're sleeping with me. What did you think would happen, Amara? That I'd break up his engagement, claim you publicly, destroy my family for this, for us?" His words cut because they were true, because she hadn't thought that far ahead, had been living in the moment, in the sensation, in the lie. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know what I thought." Min-soo's expression softened slightly, his hand cupping her face with unexpected gentleness. "You thought you could have both of us," he said quietly. "And maybe you can. Maybe this doesn't have to end." The suggestion hung between them, terrible and tempting. "You mean keep doing this even after I marry him?" Amara asked, hating how much she wanted that solution. Min-soo pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I mean, I'm not ready to give you up, and I don't think you're ready to give me up either. So yes, we keep this going. We're careful, we're smart, and we have what we have for as long as we can have it." "It's monstrous," Amara said, even as she was already leaning into him, already surrendering. "We're monstrous," Min-soo agreed, and then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, both of them falling deeper into this beautiful, terrible thing they'd created. 6 months in, Amara woke feeling nauseous. She attributed it to stress, to guilt, to the impossible situation she'd created. But when the nausea persisted, when her period was 2 weeks late, when her breasts became tender and her emotions spiraled, she bought a pregnancy test, with hands that shook so badly she could barely open the package. She took it in a gas station bathroom, unable to wait until she got home, and when those 2 pink lines appeared, her entire world collapsed. Pregnant, she was pregnant, and she had absolutely no idea who the father was. She'd been sleeping with both of them, sometimes Jae-hyun in the morning, Min-soo in the afternoon, both of them bare more often than not, because protection had become an inconvenience in the heat of the moment, because she'd convinced herself nothing bad would happen, because she'd been living in denial. Now reality crashed down with merciless force. She was carrying a child, and that child was either her boyfriend's or his father's, and there was no way to know without destroying everything, without revealing the 6 months of lies and betrayal. Amara sat in that bathroom for an hour, test clutched in her hand, trying to figure out what to do. She couldn't tell Jae-hyun, not without explaining why she wasn't sure the baby was his. She couldn't tell Min-soo, not without giving him power over her that went beyond anything they'd done before. She couldn't tell anyone, couldn't share this impossible situation with a single soul. So she stood, threw away the test, and walked out into the world wearing a smile that felt like it might crack her face in half. She'd figure this out, she told herself. She'd find a way through this disaster that didn't destroy everyone she cared about. That evening, Amara sat across from Jae-hyun at their favorite restaurant, watching him talk about wedding venues and honeymoon destinations, and all she could think was that she was carrying a baby that might not be his. The guilt was suffocating, crushing her chest until she could barely breathe. Jae-hyun reached across the table, taking her hand with a smile so pure, so trusting, it made her want to die. "You okay? You seem distracted," he said gently. "I'm fine," she lied, "just tired from all the wedding planning." He squeezed her hand, suggesting they cut the night short, take her home to rest, completely oblivious to the bomb ticking inside her. The next morning, Min-soo texted her. "My office, noon, we need to talk." She arrived exactly on time, finding him at his desk, his expression unreadable. "Close the door," he said, and she did, her heart racing. He stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace, and she saw it in his eyes before he spoke, the knowledge, the certainty. "You're pregnant," he said. Not a question. "How did you—" she started, but he cut her off. "I know your body better than you know it yourself. I've watched you for 6 months. I notice everything. The changes in your breasts, the way you've been avoiding wine, the fact that you ran from my bed last week to throw up." Amara's legs gave out, and she collapsed into the chair behind her. "It could be Jae-hyun's," she whispered. "You don't know." Min-soo crouched in front of her, his hands on her knees, his gaze intense. "It could be," he agreed, "but it could also be mine, and either way, we have a problem." "What do we do?" she asked, hating how lost she sounded. He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was fighting some internal battle. "You marry Jae-hyun as planned," he finally said, his voice rough. "You have the baby. You let him believe it's his, and we never speak of this again." The solution was practical, sensible, the only way forward that didn't destroy lives. But something in Min-soo's eyes told Amara he didn't believe his own words, that he was as trapped as she was. "What if the baby is yours?" she asked quietly. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life raising my child while pretending to be its grandfather," he said bitterly. "I'll watch you mother my baby with my son. I'll endure family dinners and holidays knowing what we did, what we created." His hands tightened on her knees. "Unless," he stopped, seemed to struggle with whatever he was about to say. "Unless what?" Amara pressed. "Unless you leave him," Min-soo said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Leave Seoul, leave this life. Let me take care of you and the baby somewhere far from here." The offer hung between them, impossible and tempting. "You can't be serious," Amara said. "I've never been more serious about anything," he insisted, standing and pulling her up with him. "These 6 months, they've been the most alive I've felt in 20 years. You've become essential to me in ways I can't explain, can't control." His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I love you, Amara. I'm in love with you, and if this baby is mine, I want to claim it, claim you. Consequences be damned." The confession broke something open in her chest, because she'd been telling herself this was just physical, just addiction, just a terrible mistake she couldn't stop making. "I love you too," she heard herself admit, the words escaping before she could stop them. "But Min-soo, even if we run, even if we disappear, Jae-hyun will find us. Your wife will find us. This will destroy your family." He kissed her then, desperate and claiming, pouring everything into it. "Then let it burn," he growled against her mouth. "Let it all burn. I don't care anymore. I can't do this. Can't keep pretending I'm not completely destroyed by wanting you." They were spiraling, both of them, caught in something bigger than either could control. Before Amara could respond, could agree or protest, Min-soo's phone rang, Jae-hyun's name flashing on the screen. Min-soo answered with perfect composure, discussing some business matter while Amara tried to steady her breathing, tried to process everything that had just happened. When he hung up, his expression had shuttered, the vulnerability locked away. "Think about what I said," he told her, "but don't take too long. We're running out of time." Then he dismissed her, returning to his desk like they hadn't just had a conversation that could end everything. Amara left his office in a daze, her hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach, wondering what life was growing there, whose eyes would look back at her, whose features would mark this child as belonging to one man or the other. 2 weeks passed in agonizing limbo. Amara continued seeing both men, unable to make a decision, unable to walk away from either. Jae-hyun grew more excited about the wedding, more devoted, more loving, making her guilt multiply daily. Min-soo grew more possessive, more intense, texting her constantly, demanding her presence, making love to her with an urgency that felt like he was trying to brand her, to mark her so thoroughly that she could never belong to anyone else. She was drowning, caught between 2 impossible choices, and the pregnancy symptoms were getting harder to hide. When Jae-hyun mentioned she seemed tired and suggested she see a doctor, panic seized her. She couldn't see his family doctor, couldn't risk anyone finding out about the pregnancy before she figured out what to do. So she found a clinic across town, paid cash, used a fake name, and confirmed what she already knew. 8 weeks pregnant, the doctor said cheerfully, showing her the tiny blob on the ultrasound screen that would someday be a person. "Do you want to know about paternity testing?" the doctor asked kindly, noticing Amara's distress. "When would that be possible?" Amara heard herself ask. "Around 10 weeks we can do a non-invasive test," the doctor explained. "Just need blood from you and potential fathers." Amara left the clinic with pamphlets she'd never read and a plan forming in her mind. She could get the test done, could find out definitively whose baby this was, and then make her decision based on fact rather than this agonizing uncertainty. It felt like a violation, testing the paternity in secret, but what choice did she have? She couldn't ask them, couldn't reveal the situation without destroying everything. 2 more weeks, she told herself. 2 more weeks, and she'd know the truth. But the universe had other plans. That weekend, Jae-hyun planned a family dinner to discuss wedding details, insisting Amara attend despite her reluctance. She showed up in loose clothing, trying to hide her slightly thickening waist, her tender breasts. The dinner started normally enough, Jae-hyun's mother gushing about flower arrangements, his father quiet and watchful across the table. Then, halfway through the meal, Amara's stomach revolted. She barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up violently, her body rejecting everything she'd eaten. When she emerged, pale and shaking, everyone was concerned. Jae-hyun wrapped her in his arms, worried and sweet. "Maybe you caught a bug," he said, rubbing her back. "Should we take you to the doctor?" His mother appeared with ginger tea, fussing over her. And Min-soo, he stood in the doorway watching her with eyes that saw everything, that knew exactly what was happening, that were dark with an emotion she couldn't name. Their gazes locked, and in that moment, something passed between them. An understanding, an acknowledgement that this charade was about to explode. Later, when Jae-hyun was helping his mother in the kitchen, Min-soo cornered Amara in the hallway. "You need to tell him," he said quietly. "This is getting out of control." "I can't," Amara whispered. "Not until I know whose baby this is." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist, his control fracturing. "It doesn't matter whose baby it is biologically," he hissed. "What matters is that we created this situation, you and I, and my son is going to pay the price for our selfishness unless we stop this now." "So what do you suggest?" Amara demanded. "That I confess everything, destroy him, destroy your family, ruin everyone's life." "Maybe that's exactly what we deserve," Min-soo said, his eyes blazing. Before either could continue, Jae-hyun called out, looking for Amara. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers, and when Jae-hyun appeared, he looked between them with the first hint of suspicion Amara had ever seen on his face. "Everything okay?" he asked slowly. "Fine," Min-soo said smoothly. "Just discussing some gallery opportunity for Amara's art." Jae-hyun's expression cleared, and he smiled, taking Amara's hand. "That's great. Dad's connections could really help your career." The innocent faith in his voice was crushing, and Amara felt Min-soo's gaze burning into her as Jae-hyun led her away, chattering about how excited he was for their future together. That night, lying beside Jae-hyun in his bed, Amara made a decision. She'd get the paternity test done as planned, would find out the truth, and then, regardless of the results, she'd end things with Min-soo. This had gone too far, become too destructive, too complicated. If the baby was Jae-hyun's, she'd marry him and never speak of this nightmare again. If the baby was Min-soo's, she didn't know what she'd do, couldn't process that possibility. But either way, the affair had to end before it destroyed what little remained of her soul. The next morning, she texted Min-soo, "We need to stop this. It's over." His response was immediate. "Meet me at the hotel, one last time. Let me say goodbye properly." She should have refused, should have held firm, but the thought of never feeling his touch again, never experiencing that intensity, it made her weak. "Fine," she texted back. "Tonight, but this is the last time. I mean it." His response was a single word: understood. But when she arrived at the penthouse suite that evening, when he opened the door and she saw the expression on his face, she knew this wouldn't be a gentle goodbye. Min-soo didn't speak, just pulled her inside and kissed her with desperate hunger, his hands already working at her clothes. "This isn't going to change my mind," Amara gasped between kisses. "I know," he growled, "but I'm going to make sure you remember this. Remember what you're walking away from, what we had." And he did, spending hours worshipping her body, drawing out her pleasure until she was begging, making her come so many times she lost count. When it was finally over, when they lay tangled together in the ruined sheets, he pulled her close and whispered against her hair, "I love you. I will always love you. And if that baby is mine, I will find a way to be part of its life, even if I have to do it from the shadows." The words broke her, and she found herself crying, all the guilt and shame and grief pouring out. Min-soo held her through it, his own face wet with tears he didn't bother hiding. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to resist you. I'm sorry I've loved you in a way that's destroyed us both." They stayed like that until dawn, holding each other, mourning what they had to give up, what they could never have. When Amara finally left, walking out of that hotel room for the last time, she felt like she was leaving a piece of herself behind, like she'd never be whole again. The next 2 weeks were torture. Amara avoided Min-soo completely, ignored his texts, his calls, his attempts to see her. She threw herself into wedding planning with Jae-hyun, trying to rebuild normalcy, trying to convince herself this was the right choice. At 10 weeks pregnant, she went to a different clinic, one even farther from home, and had blood drawn for the paternity test. They'd need samples from potential fathers, the technician explained. Did she have those? Not yet, Amara lied, but she'd get them. Somehow, she researched obsessively, learning that paternity could be tested from DNA collected off items like toothbrushes, hair with roots attached, drinking glasses. It felt invasive, criminal, but she was too far gone to care about morality. From Jae-hyun, it was easy. She simply collected his toothbrush when he wasn't looking, replacing it with an identical one. From Min-soo, she had to be more creative. She showed up at the hotel unexpectedly, claiming she'd left something behind weeks ago, and while the confused staff let her in to look, she grabbed a glass from the minibar she knew he'd drunk from, remembered seeing him use during their last night together. She submitted the samples with shaking hands, was told results would take 3 to 5 business days. Those days passed in slow agony, each moment feeling like an eternity. When the clinic finally called, Amara was sitting in a coffee shop, trying to work on a painting that had no life, no feeling. "The results are in," the woman said professionally. "Would you like to come in to discuss them, or should I tell you over the phone?" "Tell me," Amara whispered, her heart threatening to beat out of her chest. There was a pause, the rustle of papers. "The baby's biological father is," and then she said a name, and Amara's world tilted completely off its axis. "The baby's biological father is Park Min-soo." The words echoed in Amara's mind like a death sentence, like a revelation, like the answer to a question she'd been too afraid to ask. She thanked the woman mechanically, hung up, and sat frozen in the coffee shop with the truth burning through her veins. Min-soo's baby. She was carrying Min-soo's child. The man she'd ended things with 2 weeks ago, the man she'd been avoiding, the man whose son she was supposed to marry in 3 months. The father of her child was her fiancé's father, and there was no way to hide this, no way to pretend, no way forward that didn't destroy absolutely everything. Amara walked for hours through Seoul's streets, her mind spiraling through impossible scenarios. She could lie, could marry Jae-hyun and let him raise Min-soo's child, could live with that deception for the rest of her life. But what happened when the baby was born looking exactly like Min-soo? What happened when Jae-hyun's parents saw their grandchild and recognized their own son in its features instead of their grandson? What happened when the truth inevitably came out, as secrets always did, and destroyed not just her life, but an innocent child's? She couldn't do it, couldn't build a life on that foundation of lies, which left her with impossible choice number 2, telling the truth, confessing everything to Jae-hyun, to Min-soo, to everyone, and watching their lives implode. Jae-hyun would hate her, would be devastated, betrayed beyond repair. Min-soo's marriage would end, his relationship with his son destroyed forever. The scandal would ruin the Park family reputation, would tear apart everything they'd built. And for what? For a baby conceived in betrayal, for a love that should never have existed, for 6 months of selfish, destructive passion. But hiding felt impossible, and running felt cowardly, which left only the brutal honesty she'd been avoiding. That evening, Amara texted Min-soo. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. The hotel. It's urgent." His response came within seconds. "I'll be there." She spent the night rehearsing what to say, how to tell him, how to navigate the conversation that would change everything. When she arrived at the penthouse suite the next afternoon, Min-soo was already waiting, and the moment he saw her face, his expression shifted from hope to concern. "What's wrong?" he demanded, crossing to her immediately. Amara took a deep breath, pulled the paternity results from her purse, and handed them to him without a word. She watched his face as he read, watched understanding dawn, watched every emotion cross his features: shock, disbelief, wonder, fear, and finally, something that looked dangerously like joy. "It's mine," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The baby is mine." "Yes," Amara whispered. Min-soo looked at her stomach, still barely showing, and his hand reached out tentatively, asking permission. When she nodded, he placed his palm against her abdomen with a reverence that made tears spring to her eyes. "We made this," he said softly. "We created a life." The wonder in his voice was heartbreaking, beautiful, completely at odds with the disaster this represented. "What do we do?" Amara asked. Because despite everything, despite the test results and the impossible situation, she had no idea what came next. Min-soo's hand remained on her stomach, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "We tell the truth," he said firmly. "We sit down with Jae-hyun, with my wife, with everyone who needs to know, and we confess what we've done. We face the consequences together." "You'll lose everything," Amara protested. "Your marriage, your relationship with your son, your reputation." "I've already lost the things that matter," Min-soo said quietly. "I lost them the moment I fell in love with you, the moment I chose you over honor, over family, over everything I was supposed to value." "But your son," Amara insisted. "This will destroy him." "I know," Min-soo's voice broke, "and it will haunt me forever, hurting him, betraying him like this. But continuing to lie, letting him marry you while you're carrying my child, that's a worse betrayal. That's a cruelty I won't inflict." His hands framed her face, forcing her to look at him. "I love you, Amara. I love you, and I love this baby we created. And I'm done hiding, done pretending, done choosing the easy path over the right one. We tell the truth, we face whatever comes, and we do it together." The certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction, it gave Amara a courage she didn't know she possessed. "Okay," she agreed. "We tell them, but we do it carefully. We start with Jae-hyun. Let him hear it from us before anyone else." Min-soo nodded, pulling out his phone. "I'll call him now. Ask him to meet us here." "No," Amara stopped him. "Not here. Not in the place where we—" She couldn't finish. Min-soo understood, his expression softening. "My office, then. Tomorrow evening. Neutral ground. Professional." He texted Jae-hyun while Amara watched, her heart climbing into her throat. His son responded quickly, agreeing to meet at 6. They had 24 hours to prepare for the conversation that would end everything. Min-soo insisted Amara stay with him at the hotel, refused to let her face this alone. They ordered room service they barely touched, lay together on the bed, fully clothed, both too stressed to think about anything physical. "Tell me about the baby," Min-soo said quietly. "What did the doctor say? Is everything healthy?" Amara pulled out the ultrasound photos she'd been carrying, handed them to him. He stared at the small blob that would become their child, his eyes filling with tears he didn't bother hiding. "A girl or boy?" he asked. "Too early to tell," Amara said. "But I hope it's a girl." "Why a girl?" Min-soo asked, his thumb tracing the outline in the photo. "Because girls are strong," Amara said softly. "And this child is going to need to be strong, growing up with the story of how she was conceived, dealing with the scandal, the judgment." Min-soo set down the photo and pulled Amara close, his hand returning to her stomach. "She'll be strong because she'll be loved," he said fiercely. "Loved by both of us, protected, cherished, given everything we can possibly give her. And anyone who judges her, who makes her feel less than perfect, they'll answer to me." The next day passed in slow agony. Amara couldn't eat, couldn't focus, could barely breathe through the anxiety. Min-soo was steady beside her, making plans, discussing what they'd say, how they'd handle Jae-hyun's reaction. "What if he gets violent?" Amara worried. "What if he tries to hurt you?" "Then I'll let him," Min-soo said simply. "I deserve whatever he wants to do to me. I betrayed him in the worst possible way. If he needs to hurt me to process that, I'll take it. But not you," he added fiercely. "He doesn't touch you, doesn't blame you. This is on me. I'm the one who pursued you, who couldn't let you go." "That's not true," Amara protested. "I made choices too. I'm equally responsible." Min-soo's expression was gentle but firm. "You're 25 years old, you were in a relationship with my son, I'm 50. I hold all the power in this dynamic, the blame falls on me. But we'll tell him the truth, all of it, let him decide how he wants to handle his anger." At 5:30, they left the hotel separately, Amara heading to Min-soo's office through the private entrance to avoid being seen. When she arrived, he was standing by the window, dressed impeccably as always, but she could see the tension in every line of his body. At 6 exactly, Jae-hyun arrived, smiling and cheerful, completely unaware of what was about to happen. "Dad, Amara, what's this about?" he asked, taking a seat and looking between them with open, trusting eyes that made Amara want to die. Min-soo didn't sit, didn't try to soften what was coming. "Son," he said, his voice steady despite the devastation in his eyes. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen until I'm finished, no matter how much you want to interrupt." Jae-hyun's smile faded, his expression shifting to concern. "Okay," he said slowly. "You're kind of scaring me." What Min-soo said next came out in a rush, like ripping off a bandage, like jumping off a cliff. "I've been having an affair with Amara for the past 6 months. We've been sleeping together behind your back, and she's pregnant with my child." The words hung in the air like bombs, and Amara watched Jae-hyun's face as they detonated, watched him process each impossible statement, watched his entire world crumble. For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at his father like he was speaking a language Jae-hyun didn't understand. Then he turned to Amara, and the betrayal in his eyes was so complete, so devastating, she couldn't breathe. "Tell me he's lying," Jae-hyun said, his voice breaking. "Tell me this is some sick joke." "I'm so sorry," Amara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Jae-hyun. It's true, all of it." He stood abruptly, his chair crashing backward, and Min-soo moved between him and Amara instinctively, protectively. "Don't," Min-soo said quietly. "You want to hit someone, hit me, but don't go near her." Jae-hyun laughed, a horrible broken sound. "You think I'd hurt her? You think I'm capable of that? Jesus Christ, what kind of person do you think I am?" His voice rose to a shout. "I loved her. I was going to marry her. I trusted both of you." "I know," Min-soo said, his own voice rough with emotion. "And I have no excuse, no justification. What we did was unforgivable." "How long?" Jae-hyun demanded. How long have you been? He couldn't finish, couldn't say it. 6 months, Amara said quietly. Since your birthday party. Jae-hyun's face went white. 6 months, he repeated. You've been lying to me for 6 months, sleeping with my father while planning our wedding, while I talked about our future. His hands clenched into fists. While I told you I loved you, while we made love, you were… Oh God. He looked like he might be sick. The baby, Jae-hyun said suddenly, his eyes dropping to Amara's stomach. You're sure it's his? You're absolutely sure? We did a paternity test, Min-soo said. The results are conclusive. The child is mine. Jae-hyun's knees seemed to give out, and he collapsed back into his chair, his head in his hands. I can't, he said, his voice muffled. I can't process this. My father and my fiancé, my father and the woman I love. You made a baby together. The anguish in his voice was crushing, and Amara moved toward him instinctively, wanting to comfort him. But Min-soo's hand on her arm stopped her. Let him process, he said quietly. When Jae-hyun finally looked up, his face was wet with tears, but his expression had hardened into something cold, something distant. Get out, he said to Amara, his voice flat, emotionless. Get out before I say something I can't take back. Jae-hyun, please, Amara started, but he cut her off. I said get out, he shouted. I don't want to see you, don't want to hear your voice, don't want your apologies or your explanations. Just leave. Min-soo moved to escort her, but Jae-hyun's laugh was bitter. No, Dad, you stay. We have so much more to discuss. So many wonderful conversations about how you betrayed me, how you destroyed our family. Amara fled, leaving them alone, knowing Min-soo was about to face his son's rage, knowing he'd take whatever Jae-hyun needed to give him. She waited in her car in the parking garage, shaking, crying, replaying the devastation on Jae-hyun's face the moment his world shattered. An hour passed, then 2, and finally Min-soo appeared, walking slowly, his face bruised on one side, his lips split. Amara rushed out of her car. What happened? She demanded, touching his face gently. He let me hit him, Min-soo said quietly. Several times, until I couldn't do it anymore, until hitting him just made everything worse. They sat in her car together, both broken, both grieving what they'd destroyed. What now? Amara asked. Now I go home and tell my wife, Min-soo said. And you go to your apartment and pack, because you can't stay in Seoul, not with the scandal that's about to break. Where will I go? Amara asked, feeling lost, untethered. I have a house in Jeju Island, Min-soo said. Private, secure, no one will find you there. I'll make sure you have everything you need. And when things settle, when the worst of this is over, I'll come to you. You're sending me away, Amara said, her voice small. I'm protecting you and our baby, he corrected, from the media storm, from my family's rage, from everything that's about to explode. That night, Min-soo went home and confessed to his wife of 25 years. Amara wasn't there for that conversation, but later she learned it ended with his wife throwing him out, filing for divorce, and calling every society contact she had to spread the scandal as far as possible. By morning, the news was everywhere. Park Min-soo's affair with his son's fiancée, the pregnancy, the betrayal, photos of Amara that she didn't know existed appeared in gossip columns, her life dissected by strangers, her character assassinated by people who'd never met her. Min-soo moved fast, getting Amara on a private flight to Jeju before the media could find her. The house he'd mentioned was beautiful, perched on cliffs overlooking the ocean, isolated and peaceful. He'd already stocked it with everything she'd need, had hired a housekeeper and a doctor to check on her regularly. I'll visit as often as I can, he promised before leaving her there. But right now I need to manage the fallout, need to make sure Jae-hyun doesn't do something destructive. Take care of yourself and our baby, and know that I love you, even when I'm not here. The first month in Jeju was lonely, isolating, filled with guilt and grief. Amara painted obsessively, creating dark, abstract pieces that reflected her emotional state. She read every article about the scandal, watched as her name became synonymous with homewrecker, as strangers judged her, condemned her, made her into a villain. Min-soo called every day, texted constantly, but he only visited twice. both times looking exhausted, aged by the stress. Jae-hyun won't speak to me, he admitted during the second visit. Won't return my calls, blocked my number. I've lost my son completely. The guilt in his voice was crushing, and Amara held him while he cried, both of them mourning what they'd destroyed. Is it worth it? She asked quietly. Losing everything for this. For us. He pulled back to look at her, his hand moving to her stomach, now visibly swollen with their growing child. Yes, he said fiercely. Every time I see you, every time I feel our baby move, I know it's worth it. We'll build something new from the ashes. We'll create a family. And someday, maybe Jae-hyun will forgive us. Maybe he'll understand. Amara wanted to believe him, wanted to have faith that love conquered all, but the reality felt much darker, much more complicated. The second month brought morning sickness so severe Amara could barely function. The doctor prescribed medication, but nothing helped. Min-soo flew in immediately when he heard, staying for a week, holding her hair while she threw up, forcing her to sip water, looking terrified every time she grew pale. You need to eat, he kept saying. The baby needs nutrition. I can't keep anything down, Amara sobbed, exhausted and miserable. He hired a nutritionist, a chef, anyone who could help, but ultimately time was the only cure. By month 3, the sickness eased, and Amara could finally enjoy the pregnancy, could feel the flutter of movement, could imagine holding their daughter. Min-soo brought ultrasound equipment to the house, hired a technician to come weekly so they could see the baby growing. During one session, they confirmed what Amara had suspected. A girl. They were having a daughter. Min-soo's reaction was pure joy, his eyes filling with tears as he watched their daughter move on the screen. She's perfect, he kept saying. Absolutely perfect. What should we name her? Amara asked. Min-soo thought for a moment, then said, Ji-woo. It means wisdom and rain. I want her to be wise enough to navigate this world, and rain because it cleanses, because we need cleansing after what we've done. The months passed slowly, isolation broken only by Min-soo's visits and the housekeeper's daily presence. Amara's body changed, swelling with pregnancy, and Min-soo worshipped every change, constantly touching her stomach, talking to their daughter, promising her the world. He'd managed to extricate himself from most of his business obligations, delegating to others, clearing his schedule to spend more time in Jeju. The scandal had died down somewhat, replaced by newer gossip, but the damage to the Park family was permanent. Jae-hyun had left Seoul entirely, moved to New York, wanted nothing to do with Korea or his father or the memories. Do you think he'll ever forgive us? Amara asked one evening, 6 months pregnant and watching the sunset. Min-soo's arms wrapped around her from behind, his hands cradling her swollen belly. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe in time, maybe when he finds his own happiness, maybe when the pain isn't so fresh. Do you regret it? Amara asked, choosing me over him. Min-soo turned her to face him, his expression fierce. Never, he said. I regret hurting him. I regret the lies, the betrayal, but I don't regret loving you. I don't regret this baby. I don't regret building a life with you. You're my future, Amara. You and Ji-woo, and I'd make the same choice 1,000 times. At 7 months, Min-soo moved to Jeju permanently, unable to stand being apart from Amara and their daughter. He'd sold his shares in the company, liquidated assets, set up trusts for Ji-woo's future. Money wasn't an issue, but family was destroyed, reputation was ruined, and the cost of their love story was written across every sacrifice. They married quietly, just the two of them and a local official, because despite everything, despite the scandal and the judgment, Min-soo wanted Amara to be his wife, wanted their daughter born into a legal marriage. I know I'm not giving you the wedding you deserve, he said, slipping a simple band on her finger, but I'm giving you my name, my heart, my complete devotion. The wedding night was tender, careful, Min-soo worshipping Amara's pregnant body with a reverence that made her cry. You're so beautiful like this, he murmured, carrying our baby, glowing, absolutely perfect. They made love slowly, gently, both mindful of Ji-woo growing between them, and afterward, lying tangled together, Min-soo whispered confessions against Amara's skin. I was dead before you, he said, going through motions, existing but not living, You woke me up, made me feel again, made me want to be better. You destroyed my life, Amara said, but there was no heat in it, just acknowledgement. And you saved mine, Minsu replied, so I guess we're even. At 8 months, Amara's body became uncomfortable, swollen, aching in ways that made simple tasks difficult. Minsu attended to her constantly, rubbing her feet, massaging her back, reading to her and Ji-woo in the evenings. He'd transformed from Seoul's powerful businessman into a devoted husband and soon-to-be father, and the change was beautiful to witness. He talked to Ji-woo constantly, his hands on Amara's stomach, telling their daughter about the ocean, about art, about the world waiting for her. I'm going to give you everything, he promised. Everything you could ever want or need. The nursery he created was a work of art, all soft colors and careful details, toys imported from around the world, clothes in every size, books lining shelves for a child who wouldn't read them for years. He was preparing, nesting, building a sanctuary for their family. Amara painted murals on the walls, scenes from nature, animals and flowers and sky, wanting Ji-woo surrounded by beauty from birth. This is our fresh start, Minsu said, standing in the finished nursery. This is where we prove that love can survive anything, that what we have is worth what we sacrificed. At 38 weeks, Amara's water broke in the middle of the night. Minsu woke instantly, switching into calm efficiency despite the panic in his eyes. The hospital was ready. He'd made arrangements weeks ago, and within an hour they were in a private birthing suite with a doctor and nurses attending. Labor was long, brutal, 14 hours of pain that Minsu witnessed helplessly, holding Amara's hand, wiping her face, looking like he'd take the pain himself if he could. You're doing amazing, he kept saying. So strong, so brave. Our daughter is almost here. When Ji-woo finally arrived, screaming her displeasure at being evicted from her warm cocoon, Minsu cut the cord with shaking hands, his face wet with tears. The nurse placed Ji-woo on Amara's chest, and they both stared in wonder at the tiny, perfect person they'd created. She has your nose, Amara said, tracing Ji-woo's features with gentle fingers. And your mouth, Minsu added, his hand covering both of theirs. She's absolutely perfect, the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Ji-woo's eyes opened briefly, dark like her father's, and seemed to look right at them. And in that moment, all the guilt, all the scandal, all the destruction felt distant, unimportant compared to this new life. The first weeks with Ji-woo were exhausting, overwhelming, filled with sleepless nights and constant feeding, and the kind of love that was almost painful in its intensity. Minsu proved to be a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint, walking Ji-woo when she cried, singing Korean lullabies his own mother had sung to him. He couldn't stop touching her, constantly checking that she was breathing, that she was warm, that she was real. I keep thinking I'll wake up and this will be a dream, he admitted one night, holding Ji-woo while she slept. But she's here. She's ours. We made this perfect person. 3 months after Ji-woo's birth, a letter arrived at the Jeju house, addressed to Minsu in handwriting he recognized immediately. Jae-hyun. Minsu held the envelope for a long time before opening it, afraid of what it might contain. When he finally read it, his expression crumbled, and Amara took the letter from his shaking hands. It was brief, formal, devastating, and forgiving all at once. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive what you did, Jae-hyun had written, but I'm trying to understand. I met someone in New York, someone who makes me feel the way you probably feel about Amara, and I'm starting to grasp how love can make us do terrible things. The letter continued. I'm not ready to see you yet, maybe not for years, but I wanted you to know I don't hate you anymore. I don't wish you pain. I just need time and distance. Maybe someday we can rebuild something. Not what we had, but something new. I hope your daughter is healthy. I hope Amara is well. I hope you found whatever it was you were looking for when you destroyed everything. It was signed simply, Your Son. Minsu read it 3 times, his eyes filling and refilling with tears. It's not forgiveness, he said quietly, but it's not hatred either. It's a start, Amara finished. Hope that maybe someday you'll have your son back. 6 months postpartum, Amara's body had mostly recovered, and she and Min-soo were learning to navigate parenthood together, learning each other in this new context. Their physical relationship had resumed carefully, tentatively, both of them changed by Ji-woo's arrival, by the reality of their choices. One evening, after putting Ji-woo to bed, Min-soo found Amara on the terrace watching the ocean. "You seem sad," he observed, sitting beside her. "I'm not sad," Amara said, "just thinking about everything we went through to get here, all the people we hurt, all the bridges we burned. Do you regret it?" he asked, the question he'd asked before but needed answered again. Amara turned to face him, her expression serious. "I regret the pain we caused Jae-hyun," she said honestly. "I regret the scandal, the judgment, the way people look at us like we're terrible people." She paused, meeting his eyes. "But I don't regret you. I don't regret Ji-woo. I don't regret choosing love even when it was wrong, even when it destroyed things." Min-soo pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I love you," he said. "I will love you until I stop breathing. You and our daughter, you're my everything, and I love you," Amara replied. "Which is why I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." Min-soo pulled back slightly, concerned. "What is it?" "If you could go back," Amara said carefully, knowing how Jae-hyun felt, knowing what it cost him, "would you make the same choices?" Min-soo was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. Then he said, "The moral answer is no. I should say I'd resist you, that I'd value my son's happiness over my own desires." His hand cupped her face. "But the honest answer is yes. I'd make the same choices. Because a life without you, without Ji-woo, that's not a life worth living. I'd burn the world down again to have this." The words should have terrified her, should have made her question his character, his morality. Instead, they filled her with a fierce certainty that they'd survive anything, that their love, however it started, however wrong it was, had become something real, something worth defending. They made love that night with the ocean as witness, reaffirming their commitment, their choice to stay together despite everything. And when Ji-woo cried an hour later, they both went to her, working as a team, as partners, as parents who'd sacrificed everything for the right to hold this child. A year after Ji-woo's birth, Min-soo received another letter from Jae-hyun, this one containing a photo of him with a beautiful woman, a ring on her finger. "I'm getting married," the letter said, "to someone who knows the whole story and loves me anyway. I wanted you to know that I'm happy, that I've moved forward, that the pain you caused hasn't destroyed me," the letter continued. "I'm not inviting you to the wedding. I'm not ready for that. But I wanted you to see that I survived, that you didn't break me completely. I hope that brings you some peace." Min-soo showed Amara the photo, and they both cried, both so relieved that Jae-hyun had found happiness, that their betrayal hadn't ruined him permanently. "He looks good," Amara said, studying the photo, genuinely happy. "He does," Min-soo agreed. "And maybe that means we did the right thing, not in how we did it, but in not forcing him into a marriage with you when your heart belonged to someone else." "Maybe," Amara said, "but we'll never know for sure. We'll always live with the what-ifs, the maybes, the guilt." Min-soo pulled her close. "Then we carry it together," he said. "The guilt, the regret, all of it. And we make damn sure Ji-woo never has to carry it, that she grows up loved and secure and whole." 2 years after Ji-woo's birth, Min-soo proposed they return to Seoul, that they face the city that had judged them, that they live openly rather than in self-imposed exile. "I want Ji-woo to know both sides of her heritage," he explained, "Korean and Nigerian. I want her to have options, opportunities, a life bigger than this island." "Are you sure?" Amara asked. "The scandal, the judgment, has faded," Min-soo said, "replaced by newer gossip, newer scandals, and I'm done hiding, done letting shame dictate our lives. We made our choices, we live with them, but we don't have to live in exile forever." They moved back to Seoul cautiously, buying a house in a quiet neighborhood, avoiding the areas where they might encounter old contacts. Min-soo had invested wisely during their time away, had rebuilt his wealth through legitimate means, and could provide comfortably without the empire he'd once commanded. Amara opened a small art studio, teaching children, selling her work locally, building a life separate from being Mrs. Park. And Ji-woo thrived, a bright, beautiful child who had her father's intensity and her mother's creativity, completely unaware of the scandal surrounding her conception. 3 years after Ji-woo's birth, Amara discovered she was pregnant again. The news sent Min-soo into a panic of joy, alternating between excitement and terror. What if something goes wrong? He worried. You're older now. The pregnancy could be risky. I'm 30, Amara laughed. Not geriatric, but he insisted on the best doctors, the most careful monitoring, treating her like spun glass despite her protests. This pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect, and 7 months in, they learned they were having a boy. Min-soo was overwhelmed, crying when they saw their son on the ultrasound. A son, he whispered. I get another chance at being a father to a son. The parallel to Jae-hyun wasn't lost on either of them. Promise me, Amara said seriously, that you won't try to replace what you lost with Jae-hyun, that you'll love this baby as himself, not as a second chance. Min-soo's hand covered hers on her swollen belly. I promise, he said. This baby is his own person, and I'll love him completely, but I'll never stop missing Jae-hyun, never stop hoping that someday we'll reconcile. I know, Amara said gently, and that's okay. You're allowed to grieve what you lost while loving what you have. Their son was born on a spring morning, quick and relatively easy compared to Ji-woo's birth. They named him Tae-jun, meaning great and talented, hoping he'd live up to the name. Ji-woo was fascinated by her baby brother, constantly wanting to hold him, to help, to be involved. Min-soo watched his children together with an expression of such contentment that Amara's heart ached. We did it, she said one evening. We survived the scandal, built a family, created something good from something terrible. We did, Min-soo agreed, pulling her close while their children slept, and I'd do it all again, every painful moment, every sacrifice, for this. 5 years after Ji-woo's birth, the impossible happened. Jae-hyun returned to Seoul with his wife and young daughter, reaching out to Min-soo to request a meeting. Min-soo was terrified, hopeful, devastated all at once. What if he's changed his mind, wants to tell me off in person? He worried. Or maybe, Amara suggested gently, he's ready to move forward, ready to let you meet your granddaughter. The meeting was arranged at a neutral cafe, and Min-soo dressed with trembling hands, looking older than his 55 years, worn down by 5 years of estrangement. Amara stayed home with the children, knowing this was something Min-soo needed to do alone. He returned 3 hours later, his eyes red but his expression lighter than she'd seen in years. We talked, he said. Really talked. He's still hurt, still angry sometimes, but he's willing to try, to build something new. He paused. He wants to meet Ji-woo and Tae-jun, wants his daughter to know her half-siblings. The words hung between them, fragile and hopeful. When? Amara asked. Next week, a park, somewhere public and safe. The meeting was awkward, painful, beautiful all at once. Jae-hyun looked at Ji-woo and Tae-jun with complicated emotions, seeing his father in their features, seeing the half-siblings he'd never expected to have. Ji-woo, oblivious to the tension, asked Jae-hyun if he wanted to play, her innocence breaking through some of the discomfort. Jae-hyun's daughter joined in, and the children played while the adults watched, navigating careful conversation. I'm sorry, Min-soo said again, for the 1000th time. I know, Jae-hyun replied, and I'm working on forgiveness, but it takes time. Over the following years, they built a fragile peace. Family dinners happened occasionally. Holidays were sometimes shared. Ji-woo and Tae-jun grew up knowing their older half-brother Jae-hyun, understanding in age-appropriate terms that their family was complicated. Amara and Min-soo celebrated their 10th anniversary in Jeju, returning to where they'd built their life together. A decade, Amara marveled. 10 years since everything fell apart and came together. Best decade of my life, Min-soo said. Despite everything, despite the cost, I'd choose this every time. They'd created something beautiful from betrayal, something lasting from scandal, a family that shouldn't exist but did, thriving despite judgment. Their children were happy, healthy, loved beyond measure. Jae-hyun had found peace and happiness with his own family, and Min-soo and Amara had found in each other a love worth every sacrifice, every burned bridge, every moment of pain. Standing on the Jeju cliffs where they'd first begun their life together, watching their children play while the ocean roared below, Amara understood something fundamental. Love wasn't always right, wasn't always moral, wasn't always clean or simple or justifiable. Sometimes it was messy, destructive, born from wrong choices and terrible timing, but it was still love, still real, still worth fighting for. She'd slept with her boyfriend and his father, had gotten pregnant not knowing whose child she carried, had destroyed a family to build her own. And she'd do it all again, would make the same impossible choices, would walk the same dark path, because at the end of it waited Min-soo, Ji-woo, Tae-jun, a life she'd never planned but couldn't imagine living without. This was their story. Complicated and controversial, judgment-worthy and beautiful, a testament to the fact that sometimes the wrong path leads to exactly where you're meant to be. If you loved this complicated, beautiful, messy love story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Comment below and tell us, could you forgive a betrayal like this? Would you choose love over loyalty? What would you have done in Amara's place? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.